Our next lesson is on multiplication and division equations. Before we go on, it's important to learn some vocabulary. We have coefficients with multiplication, especially equations. So a coefficient is the number that's in front of the variable in each term. So we look and we have our terms. 3x squared is a term, 5x is a term, and 2 is a term. And the coefficient is the number that is in front of those variables. The coefficient is the number that is in front of those variables. So the 3 and the 5 are coefficients. The 2 is not a coefficient because it's not directly in front of a variable. The steps for solving multiplication or division equations are just like addition and subtraction. Copy the original equation, then look at the operation. Perform the inverse operation to isolate the variable on both sides of the equation, then solve to find the value of the variable. So in this case, the inverse operation, if we have multiplication, we'll divide. If we have a division equation, we're going to solve by multiplying. And we have to make sure we do that inverse operation on both sides of the equation to keep it balanced. Let's do some examples together. Make sure you copy all the work as demonstrated so you know how to show your work when you do your independent practice problems later. I have two examples written side by side so you can see how they're different once we set them up and solve them. The first one is going to be a multiplication equation. So this is 6x equals 54. And if we wanted to apply a real life situation to this, we could say 6 times something gets us to 54, or 6 groups of something, or 6 packages of something would get us to 54. So we have a multiplication sign here, and the 6 is the coefficient, the x is the variable, and 54 is the answer to the equation. We have to isolate the x, isolate the variable. So in order to do that, we perform the inverse operation, and the opposite operation is to divide by 6. And we want to make sure we do both sides. So 6 divided by 6 is now 1, and you have x isolated, and 54 divided by 6 is 9. And if we wanted to check that, we can just substitute in 9 for x in the original equation. 6 times 9, and we do get 54, so we are correct. With our division equation, we had m divided by 16 equals 48. The first step is to copy the original equation, just how you see it. Then we're going to just recopy it underneath. Our original problem is m divided by 16. Then we need to write the inverse. And the inverse of dividing by 16 is to multiply by 16. So we need to make sure we do the inverse operation and multiply by 16 on both sides of the equation, because it's a dividing by 16 and a times 16. That's like saying 16 divided by 16. So that's just 1, and you have m by yourself. And we'll go ahead and work out off to the side 48 times 16. 8 times 6 is 48. 24 and 4 is 28. Bring down your 0, and we're done with this 4. 1 times 8 is 8, and 1 times 4 is 4. And then we add them together to get our product. 8 and 0 is 8. 8 plus 8 is 16. And 1 plus 2 plus 4 is 7. So our answer for the value of m is 768. And if we wanted to check that, we would substitute the 768 in for the m. So we would do 768 over 16, or divided by 16, should equal 48. And if I did that on the calculator, it does work, so we are correct. Now, sometimes you might be given a word problem or a real-life application problem to write and then solve an equation. So we're going to do two examples of those. First, we have our multiplication one. It says the length of an object in feet is equal to 3 times its length in yards. The length of a water slide is 48 feet. Write and solve a multiplication equation to find the length of the water slide in yards. So a nice thing about this one, it does tell us that we're going to have a multiplication equation, and we have is 48 feet, so that means it's going to be equal 48 feet. And then the top part says the length of an object in feet is equal to 3 times the length in yards. So we don't know how many yards the water slide is. So we're going to set up an equation to help us figure that out. So the equation we're going to set up is going to be 3, because the object is going to be 3 times the length in yards, and we're going to put times W, because we don't know how long the water slide is in yards, but we do know that that water slide is 48 feet. So that means 3 times however many yards that water slide is going to give us the 48 feet. So we want to figure out the value for W. We're going to need to do the inverse operation. Since I have a multiplication equation, I'm going to need to solve it by doing the inverse operation, which is to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And 3 divided by 3 is just 1, so now W is isolated. And 48 divided by 3 is 16. So what we know from that is the water slide should be 16 yards long. And if we wanted to check that, we can always substitute it back in. 3 times 16 does equal 48, so we are correct. For the division problem, we have Katie and her friend found some money on the couch. Once they split it evenly, each girl was given $18. Write and solve a division equation to find out the total amount of money that there was originally in the house. So we know that the answer is going to be 18 because that's how much they ended up with. And there were 2 friends. So to figure out how much they started with, since it was split up and they're asking us to find a division equation, we're going to need to write a division equation that will equal 18. So how we'll set this up is we'll let T be the total that we started with, divided by 2, since there were 2 girls. And once they divided that total among the 2 girls, each girl got $18. So our equation is T divided by 2 equals 18. And for division problems, we're just going to copy down that first part again. And notice our original operation is divided by 2, so our inverse is going to be times 2. So we have times 2. That means on the other side of the equation, we're going to need to do 18 times 2. Now remember, when you have a divided by 2 and a times 2, multiply and divide cancel each other out. This is like saying I have 2 divided by 2, so that's 1, and now we have the T isolated. And 18 times 2 is 36. So that means they found $36 under the couch, or in the couch, and split it up among their friends, or split it up among each other. And if we wanted to check that, we would just substitute it in. 36 divided by 2 does equal 18, so we are right. Now, just a quick review. Whenever you're solving multiplication or division problems, show all the work exactly as demonstrated so you don't miss any steps. Number 2, complete the independent practice problems on the back of your video homework page. 3, write down any questions you may have about something that may have confused you. So if you didn't understand why we did something or weren't sure of where we got numbers, make sure you write that down. And last, rewatch the video if you need to go over more examples.